Chapter 13 is on employee performance and recognizing it with pay. Slide 2 talks about incentive pay, and incentive is simply some type of reward that would give you the desire to move forward to try to complete some type of a goal or a task that's been set forth for you. So incentive pay, it really is linked to your performance, and it can be as an individual. So if I do an evaluation of your work and it turns out that I think that you're doing a good job, you would qualify for additional pay, whether it be a bonus or maybe stock or some type of an award. You could also get incentive pay as a part of a group or as part of the organization as a whole. Some organizations offer stock options. They give you profit sharing. That recognizes the work of everybody in the organization. You could also make teams work a little bit more coherently together by giving them the opportunity to get a group award. It becomes a little bit more hard to manage sometimes because some of the people on the team may not be performing at the same level as others. There could be some hurt feelings or some jealousy or strife regarding whether or not you got the reward that you should. Individual is the cleanest in terms of a manager being able to divvy out whatever the reward might happen to be. Because you're only looking at one person. Again, whether it's organization, group, or individual, it's very important that whatever scale or evaluation process that you use, it has to be perceived as being fair so that people will understand that they have a reasonable opportunity to get it and that they're being treated transparently and fairly. Incentive pay is pretty influential in terms of how much of an impact it has on someone's performance, because a lot of the work that you do, you want to be recognized for a good job. Obviously, people like to have more money. They will model their behavior at work and try to achieve certain goals if they know that they have an incentive in order to get there. The incentive pay could be in the form of a bonus, which is simply additional money on top of your salary, or it could be a commission. A commission is typically used in sales. If you have a sales job, you're selling cars or you're selling products at a particular store. What a commission means is you get a percentage of the sales. So if you get a 5% commission and you sell $100,000 worth of stuff in a month, you get $5,000. There's ways that you can combine a commission with salary as well. There's obviously an incentive there because if you're not going to sell as much, you're not going to get as much money. If you're not going to manufacture as much product, you're not going to get paid as much. So the incentive is there to perform at a higher level. But if you're working on nothing but commission, it can be very challenging. If you end up having a bad month, you may not be able to pay rent. So most places, or at least it's a common way of approaching it, is to give someone a combination of a salary and a commission so that you would get at least enough money to have, pocket money to be able to feed yourself and pay rent. And if you have a bad month, you'll be able to float by. If you have a good month, you'll be able to have that incentive and try to perform at a high level going forward. You have to be worried a little bit as a manager with incentive pay that you're giving the incentive to do things that you're not really looking for. This is basically the rule of unanticipated or unintended consequences. If you're manufacturing something and I pay you a bonus because you make more than you did before, if you cut corners in order to get the production up higher, it may be a problem because the quality of the product is going to be less. So you have to have some measures. It's just not pure output. It's got to be output plus quality. And that also applies to service. If you try to do something as a service for a whole bunch of people and it suffers because you're trying to do too much, you have to be careful about how your incentive plan is established. Slide 3 reviews some effective incentive pay requirements. 1 through 6, I'll just go through them really quickly. You have to have the performance measures, as I just referenced, to make sure that whatever it is that rewarding you is linked to the organization's goals. I may have mentioned this in class before, but if you're going to be doing some type of an evaluation, it has to have some kind of a connection to the actual performance that you're looking for. I think I gave the example previously of a call center. And if you only reward people for taking the most number of calls, that goes into that quality issue we were just discussing. If you answer a bunch of calls and you don't give people the information they need, why would I reward you for simply increasing your volume if people are not going to be satisfied? It's going to reflect badly on the company, and the customers are not going to be happy. They may not want to continue to patronize our organization. So make sure whatever incentive you get, avoid that unintended consequence, and it is linked to the mission so that it can be managed appropriately. Employees have to be challenged, but they cannot be given an impossible task. If you give them too much, they're not going to think that it's a feasible objective. So if I'm going to give you a $10,000 bonus at the end of the year, but you think you have no way of doing it, you may not even try. It has to be something that you can actually achieve. It has to get you out of your comfort zone, and you can view it as a challenge rather than as an impossibility. Number 3 talks about the organization and the resources that they need. A lot of people are given tasks, and if you don't have particularly good management, they may not give you the materials, the time, the resources, the people, the access that you need to be able to be successful. So if you put an incentive pay program into place, even if you follow the first steps and it's linked to the organizational goals and they think they can do it, if you don't give them the equipment or the tools that they need to do it, it's going to have a problem for them. Employees also have to value the rewards given. If the reward at the end of the day is plaque on the wall that says you're Employee of the Month, if the employees care about it, that's great. If they don't, it's not going to provide them much of an incentive to be able to perform at a higher level. So it's got to be something that they want. Typically money, most people can agree, does provide some level of incentive, but it doesn't have to be only money. It could be a parking space, it could be some perks, it could be compensatory vacation time, maybe access to a development program, something like that, may be effective as long as people give it value. They're not going to work for something that they don't think is worth it. Fairness is quite important as well. So if one person is performing at a high level and another person isn't quite up to par, but the other person is the one who gets the bonus, it can be viewed as an unfair, and you get an equity issue, equity in the term of fairness, not in ownership. But that's something that we've talked about before. So if you have some type of a system, you have to mete out the rewards on a fair basis, and it has to be transparent. If you let everybody know what the incentives are, and it's an easy way that everybody can understand, and it's perceived as being fairly attributed to those who perform at a high level, then it will be more successful. One thing about creating incentives for certain parts of the job is that people may undervalue other still important aspects of their work. If you reward people for one thing and you don't reward them for something else, they may minimize the other efforts and only focus on one thing. Again, we're looking at avoiding unintended consequences. They may do great on the thing that you're paying them for an incentive, but they may be lax and let some of the other work that they are required to do fall by the wayside. Slide 4 is just a quick thing about JetBlue and what they use. You can nominate people for rewards. You can put information up on an intranet that they've got and give people recognition. This is more of a pat in the back, but it's something that people, if they value it, like we said on the previous slide, it can achieve the objective of getting people to modify their behavior and work harder towards a goal that the company values. Slide 5 talks about motivating employees. So again, you have to think that it's fair. If you give the employees some level of empowerment and let them have some feedback in terms of how the incentive should be allocated, they can buy into it a little bit more, and that goes a long way to also proving that it's fair. We talked about some issues regarding personalities. If the employees are working there, the assumption is that they want to be there, they want their job to be interesting, and everybody likes to have some level of appreciation. So as long as you can create some type of an incentive plan that gives appreciation for their efforts, it's not just cutting them a check. It allows them to be flexible in trying to achieve their goals. And especially when you have incentives for groups or for teams or for potentially the entire organization as a whole, when you achieve that objective and you get it as part of a group, it increases that sense of belonging to the group. And it also has an individual level of satisfaction because you know that you contributed to the success of the organization and the team that you happen to be working for. Some ways that you can do individual performance are covered on slide 6. Piecework rates refers to simply paying people. This is typically a manufacturing strategy where you pay them by the work that they complete. A straight piecework plan is when people are paid simply on the amount that they produce. Piecework rates typically are applied to manufacturing jobs. So if you have a product that you need to complete, you just get paid based on the number of things that you produce. That is completely output oriented. You could also have a differential piece rate, which is basically where we've assumed that in order to make a certain amount of money per hour, you have to complete a minimum number of products or items that you need to complete. If you complete more than that, it almost is like a bonus on top of it. You have to work at the minimum standard to make the hourly rate. If you fall below that, you would probably get a little bit of a dip in pay, but it wouldn't be as harsh as the straight piecework plan. If you've got maybe you figure it out that in an hour you need to produce 15 items You'll get paid as long as you continue to do 15, your regular hourly pay. We may give you essentially a bonus if you go beyond the 15, so you get incremental steps higher so that you make a little bit more per hour. Standard hour plans is probably more geared towards service jobs where instead of manufacturing something, it's a task that you have to complete. We may figure out that in the service that you're providing, you need to be able to complete a certain number in an hour. So I think the book gives an example of doing a tune-up or an oil change or something, and they think that it would take about 2 hours for you to do it. If you do that in less than 2 hours, you get the regular pay for the 2 hours, even if you work only an hour and a half. That means you can squeeze in more work during the day and end up making more money. We also still want to make sure that we're not losing quality here, so there has to be an evaluation component in here to make sure that the work is still being kept at a high enough standard to make it make sense. Merit pay is where your regular salary increases because you are deemed to be a valuable employee. We do an evaluation over the course of a year. If you're in the top 5%, we're going to give you a raise. And that will be a permanent raise. It will go into your regular hourly or salary for the year that you get. This is pretty advantageous for the employee. It can be very expensive for the company, though, because if you are continually rated very high, where it's not a one-time bonus, you're actually increasing someone's salary on the basis of their evaluation of their performance. As noted, it's very important that you have a good evaluation system in place. Otherwise, you give rewards for the wrong type of work. We touched upon individual bonuses a little bit. So if you perform at a particular goal that has been set for you and you meet those criteria, you will get a one-time bonus. This is to be distinguished from merit pay because it does not increase your hourly wage or your annual salary. It is just money that you make on top of it. So the distinction between merit pay, where your salary could go up every year and continue to go up by a certain percent, you could get almost an exponential growth. You have to be careful about how much money you can reward people for that in terms of merit pay, whereas in a bonus, it does not affect your regular rate of pay. It is only because you achieve some type of standards that have been set and you get paid a one-time bonus that does not impact your regular pay. Sales commissions, I talked about a little bit already on the previous slide, and I kind of gave the example of that. You get paid a percentage of the sales that you generate. That can also be combined with a flat salary with a bonus or a commission on top of it. That really is what dictates how it works. A lot of jobs do have this salary plus commission way of doing it because it's pretty stressful to be in a job where you may realize that you're not going to get paid anything if you don't perform well, or you may just have a bad month. It could be a recession. You may not have any sales. It's pretty tough to be on a straight commission job. Slide 7 basically is just a graphical representation of what each of these plans looks like. So the piecework rate, it's the amount that you produce. The straight piecework plan is that you get paid a rate per piece no matter how much you produce. So it's really what we're looking at in terms of making it completely reliant on the amount that you produce, whereas the differential rate does have kind of a set established amount that we expect you to do, and if you exceed it, you make more money. Slide 8 is kind of an example of this unintended consequences that we're trying to avoid. The comic in there, I think it's Dilbert, they wanted to have bug-free software, so they pay people to find the bugs in the software, and of course the staff is all saying, great, because they're going to make software with bugs in it. You're giving them an incentive to create bad software so that they can get credit for it and be paid by fixing the bugs that they made. So that's not a good example of how incentives should be applied. Pay for individual performance on slide 9. You have a standard hour plan. This is, again, what we were talking about just a couple of slides ago, just in a little bit more detail to explain it one at a time. You get paid a little bit more than if you did the work that you're required to do in the standard time. If you produce more, you get paid more. So this is more for a service job as opposed to a production or a manufacturing job. It is very similar to piecework in that sense. Merit pay, what we mentioned is you look at the performance rating and then you'll deal with the compa ratio. I think we talked about that earlier. We can go over it a little bit more, I think, on a couple of slides down the road. But when you look at someone's pay grade, and we did that chart where you have the line pretty much going up at a 45-degree angle, and you try to figure out where people are being paid. Your merit pay can be based on where you fall on that chart. If you're a little bit below what the standard or the median of that grade for your salary that you're in, your merit pay could be a higher percentage. If you're already above the median and you're having, because of past success, in order to control how much the company pays, because these are permanent raises that you're getting in your wage or your salary, then the merit pay would probably be incrementally smaller. If you're already 5 or 10% above what the other people in your pay grade are getting, you may still be a great employee, but we will give you a smaller percentage of merit pay. That can potentially be a disincentive to continue to work hard and effectively, but you're still getting the rewards that other people aren't, so the incentive should still be there. Slide 10 shows exactly what we were just talking about. So very frequently, I've seen very complicated evaluation systems. Most have fallen into basically one of three categories. You either meet expectations, you exceed, or you're below expectations. If you are at a compa ratio where you're only 80 to 90% of what the median in your salary range is expected to be, and you exceed expectations, your merit increase is going to be more because we want you to catch up with everybody else. If you are pretty much in the ballpark of where you should be, it might be 5%. If you're already making a lot more money because of prior merit pay raises, your subsequent future merit pay raises will be capped a little bit lower. And this is, again, management's way of trying to control salaries, because we don't want people to be making hundreds of thousands of dollars over time, because if you get a 7% bump every year, you would be way outside the normal range that we would have an expectation for the job that you're working in. If you meet expectations, again, it depends on where you are. It's not going to be as big a merit increase because you're not performing at an exceptional rate. And if you're below, you will get a raise if you're underpaid, because we still want to provide that incentive. But if you're making pretty much where you should be or even a little bit more, you may not get any merit increase at all, which you probably shouldn't, because your performance has been evaluated to be less than what is expected. Slide 11 is just a graphical representation of the previous slide. Slide 12 covers performance bonuses, and again, as I pointed out earlier, this is not rolled into your base pay like merit pay is. This is just a one-time, or it could be annual, but it's just a cash award for exceeding the work that you are been assigned to do, or you meet the challenge that we've given to you in order to qualify for the bonus. So you don't have to worry about having a runaway salary process where you have to use the compa ratio to make sure that people are being paid appropriately. If you earn the bonus, you get the bonus, your salary stays the same. The last bullet there is probably the most important, because if you're going to reward someone a bonus, we talked about how important it is that the entire system be perceived as being fair. If you are using subjective ratings, where you're just giving bonuses to people that you like, instead of the objective performance measurements that you should be looking at, then people could get resentful of the fact that other people are getting bonuses simply because of who they know or the relationship that they have with the manager. So it should be tied to objective evaluation, valid performance measures that are linked to the mission of the entire organization. Slide 13 covers sales commissions, and I already kind of mentioned this again, so I've talked over the slide a little bit. I'm not going to go over it anymore, but please read through it. It basically reaffirms what we've already stated. Slide 14 specifies that the performance bonuses for production workers are also not rolled into base pay. The commission could still be related to performance, however. So unlike a bonus where we say, hey, this year we'd like to sell X number of items, and you do it so you get a bonus, this is still production based. So what you get is you basically getting a share of the work that you're doing that is in excess of what we would ordinarily expect. This is when you have a commission combined with a base salary. Slide 15 talks about gain sharing. This is more for groups, so it's an incentive program. We look at the effectiveness of the group. Hopefully, the idea of being able to be rewarded for your group work means that you will be more cohesive and act more like a team player, because if you do, the team will be more effective and more likely to get the reward at the end of the day. This gives people a little bit more freedom too, and hopefully, again, you've picked people that are good for their jobs. They're good to be in a team. They have complementary skill sets. You don't want to put people on a team that aren't particularly well suited to be on a team to be able to perform that way. But if you do have good employees and they know that if they work together, they'll get a bonus, they are more likely to act in a cohesive manner. Slide 16 talks about the conditions that you would want to have in place to have effective gain sharing. Management has to be committed to it. Sometimes management just pays lip service and employees just kind of roll their eyes because they think that maybe this is something that they're just talking about, but they're not really going to fulfill it. You have to be able to walk the walk and talk the talk, as they say. So if management is going to create this type of a system, they need to employ it and implement it in an effective fashion so that people realize that this is a real thing that we can benefit from. By focusing on the commitment to the job and continuous improvement, that's the types of goals that you give to people to work together in a team. That can result in better team performance and better products and possibly making you more competitive in the environment where you're in business. Management should also be willing to listen to employee input. If you have a gain sharing program that has some kinks that don't really work or make a lot of sense, if people complain about it, you need to listen to them and take steps to address their concerns to make sure that the performance targets are feasible and that the entire system is functional. I'm not going to go through everything on the list, but obviously these things have some merit to be able to get people to buy into the gain share program. The Scanlon plan is kind of an old way of looking at it, but it is still pretty effective and it is in use. So what the management would do in a Scanlon plan is you would basically look at how much money we would think that we have to spend on labor costs versus the sales value of the production that we have. So in the example that they give you, they came up with a target. 100 is basically the amount of the value of our production. We're willing to put 20% of that as labor costs. If the employees outperform our expectations and they bring in $1.2 million, then that's a little bit more than we would have expected. So the goal is 20%. So you have 20 as the numerator and 100 in the denominator, and you multiply that by this value that we had, which is $1.2 million. That means $240,000 can go out to the employees. That's what you would expect. If the actual labor costs were lower because the employees managed to work more efficiently, then you would look at the difference between what was actually produced, what was expected to be produced, and then you can share the value of the money that's left over as a bonus. In this case, that would be $30,000. The Scanlon plan is essentially a bonus program, but it specifies how it should be addressed. It basically establishes the rules for that type of bonus that you would be giving out. And the focus is on minimal labor costs. So the incentive there is for the employees to work more efficiently and figure out ways to address their own performance so that they can exceed expectations and end up getting a bigger share of the pie. 18 has information about group bonuses. They tend to be smaller for work groups as opposed to an individual bonus because you're giving it to a group of people and you're going to be splitting the reward. However, it can really help the team perform a little bit better. It may put more pressure on the team and you may have some splintering and maybe some backbiting among the people who are working there if they feel that the team is going to cost them some money. You just have to weigh it as a manager and figure out if it's worth it. Typically, if it's performed correctly or if it's implemented correctly, people will be able to perform at a higher level and pursue those bonuses and hopefully successfully be able to get them to the betterment of everybody. They get a bigger piece of the pie, the company gets better work out of their staff. Team awards are also very similar to group bonuses, but it's probably more like for a division of a company, so it's a bigger group of people. If we have the manufacturing department as opposed to a group within the manufacturing sector, we just want them to save money. So whether that's using less toner in the copiers, creating a situation where you can give an incentive to use less resources, they complete a project on time, they do a high level of performance, then you can give a team reward. Slide 19 simply shows a picture and gives you some idea about what a group bonus is. There's not a lot to talk about there. On slide 20, we talk about some other types of bonuses that you could give for organizational performance. The three that are going to be covered are profit sharing, and then the other two on the middle and the right side, these involve stock. So in a corporation, stock is simply equity, it's ownership, not equity as in fairness, but equity in this case as in ownership of the company. You can give people stock options or the opportunity to earn stock options, or you can create something called an employee stock ownership plan, which is essentially a trust. We'll get to that more on the subsequent slides. Slide 21 covers profit sharing. So if we are going to give you some type of an incentive, What profit sharing would be doing is it's kind of a global view of the company's performance. If the company performs at a high level and they outperform because all of the employees are vested in doing the work that they need to do, and you have a good quarter or a good year, then the extra money that you made above your target, you could give that back to your employees. Now, a profit is simply the money that you have earned less expenses. That's what every business is trying to do. If you thought that you're going to have a profit of, $6 million, and then the employees realize that through profit sharing, they may get a bigger piece, you could give them maybe a certain percentage over for every dollar that is earned over the target expectation. So the company could earn $7 million. That makes everybody eligible for profit sharing. If you gave them 20%, they'd be able to split $200,000. The company still makes a bigger profit, so they're happy, and they're simply sharing a piece of that with the employees to give the incentive to work harder. Part of the reason that some companies employ this is because the individual employees will start acting as if the company were their own. If you imagine that you were just making an hourly wage and you worked for a boss and it didn't matter how much work you did, you're going to make the same amount of money, what is your incentive to work harder? There really isn't much. But if you knew that if you worked hard and everybody around you worked hard and you helped them work hard and they helped you work hard and the company made more money, if you knew that was going to put more money in your pocket at the end of the year as a result, you may start acting more responsibly, you may be acting more like an owner to try to minimize expenses and increase productivity. Slide 22 covers the stock ownership piece. So stock options is basically the opportunity afforded to an employee by the company to buy stock in the company. If I'm a new company, for example, I may not have a lot of money to be able to pay you in salary. One of the ways that I could get you to come to our company and to work hard is to give you the opportunity to buy stock. Let's say you have to work here for 5 years, and after 5 years of successful performance, we will let you buy a certain number of shares of stock at a rate that is frozen in time now. If you work hard and the company performs well, probably the value of the stock will increase over those 5 years, and you'll be able to buy it at that time for a cheaper rate so you could profit more as a result. So if I let you buy stock at $10 a share in 5 years and it's selling for $12 a share now, but by the time you actually are able to exercise your stock option and purchase it, you may be able to buy $20 stock for $10 a share. So you're able to make a win on that. You get the benefits of the stock by paying dividends and receiving dividends. But if you wanted to sell that stock, you'd be able to do it and gain because you would be getting the stock at a lower market price than would be afforded to anybody else who was trying to buy it at that time. This is typically something that does not happen for lower level employees. These are benefits and bonuses that they give to higher level executives, and often it's a way to attract really high level talent so that they can have an impact on the company, increase the stock price, and then be able to be rewarded for that performance. It also makes them want to stay there for the period of time necessary for the stock option offer to vest. If you have to be there for 5 years, you're not going to leave in 3 or 4, hopefully, because if you do, you won't be able to buy the stock. So it does give an incentive both to stay and to perform at a high level. An ESOP, which is the stock trust, is where employees share the award of stock and place it into a trust. What a trust is essentially a legal body that manages property for others for their benefit. If you create a trust, you would have a trustee. So you would have one person managing that trust. You would put all of the employees' stock in it. And then they would basically parcel out the rewards from that stock, whether it be dividends or increase in value somehow. You would be able to have that distributed to all the beneficiaries. And in this case, the beneficiaries would be the employee. This is the most common way that employees can own stock, and it doesn't necessarily have to apply to executives. So if you're a lower level employee, you would probably get one of these trust programs. If you're a higher level executive, you are more likely to get stock options. Slide 23 simply shows the growth in these employee stock ownership programs, these trusts. Back in the 70s, there weren't that many. By the turn of the 21st century, there was a lot more. You could see that they dropped a bit between 2002 and 2007. That was because of the recession. We don't have any data here that would show. I wouldn't be surprised if they had increased. Given the state of the economy right now, I wouldn't be surprised that the subsequent years it'll show that there was a dip now because companies are going to be struggling because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Slide 24 covers how you can manage performance. A balanced scorecard is essentially something that management can use to determine whether the company's long and short-term goals are being met. You can create what's also known as a dashboard. If you think about driving in a car, a dashboard gives you very quick feedback. How fast am I going? How many miles have I driven? How much gas do I have left? The main core things that you need to know. A balanced scorecard is you identify the things that you want to monitor on a regular basis. How much money is coming in? How much are our expenses? What is our output? You keep that as a way to very quickly figure out how to determine if your company is performing at a high level. The categories that most balanced scorecards have is your financial performance, how happy your customers are, how your employees are working internally, and how well your employees are learning and growing through your training and development programs. Slide 25 shows how the balanced scorecard can have an impact on performance pay. On the first category, which is the performance category, you have member service. That's 40% of your incentive pay. So these are the dashboard or the balanced scorecard issues that we're looking at. The critical success factors have been identified by management. Reliability. This is basically an electric company, so how frequently you have service interruptions is something to be able to look at. Your base is only 2%, and that you can complete the interruption in only 140 minutes. The stretch is 120 minutes, which is better. Obviously, you have a shorter term interruption in service. You would get a bigger benefit from that because your goal would be 5%. Customer satisfaction index, we want them to get the base, which is a 2% bump. If it goes up to 9.1, 9.2, there would be a corresponding percentage that would be associated with that. Financial performance, how much are we charging for the generation of the kilowatt hours that we're putting out? And then the cash flow is the other thing that we're looking at. It's 75% is your base. The stretch is 85%. So these are the things that you would look at in the balanced scorecard to find out if you're meeting all of the criteria for your performance structure. Slide 26 just talks about a few more. I'm not going to go through all of that right now, but just take a look at it. It'll give you more examples. Slide 27 talks about the processes that you can use to help the incentives work. We've talked a lot about employee empowerment. Participation in decisions is important. So if we're going to create a bonus plan, it would be a good idea, rather than just rolling it out one day and saying, hey, great news, everybody, we've got an incentive plan. We might want to sit down and say, we're thinking of doing an incentive plan, and here are the things that we think would be useful. If it turns out that these are going to be incentives that either cannot be met because they're not possible, you don't have the resources to do it, you can get feedback from your employees to help you correct that before you roll it out and maybe turn people off to the whole idea. If the employees participate in it, they're more likely to buy into it and view it as a fair and equitable process. Tied to that very closely is communication. So again, if you're able to tell people exactly what the ground rules are for getting a bonus and make it clear and transparent for everybody that if you meet these certain criteria, this is what you're going to get. And then after people get it, it's certainly okay to advertise the fact that, X number of people made the bonuses last year. People can get feedback so that they know that it is valid, and it can give them the incentive to actually pursue it. If you never communicate it, people aren't going to be aware of what's going on. There's going to be a level of ambiguity. People may not be willing to buy into the incentive program. And even if it's a good program, if you don't communicate it appropriately, it may not be quite successful. Incentive pay for executives is on slide 28. Short-term incentives, you can pay bonuses based on ROI. You should all know that that means return on investment. So if you're an executive, you're probably going to be concerned with stock prices, the performance, and the payments that the owners are going to get, whether it be in the form of dividends or profit sharing. So you can get a bonus if you're an incentive on the short term. We had a good quarter, I might get a bonus to help bump my overall pay. You can also strategically decide when the bonus is going to be paid. If I earn a bonus and I've also had a pretty good year, I may want to defer it to after the 31st of December so that I can pay less in taxes on it. It may also have something to do with the taxes being paid by the organization, because if you pay more to your employees, your profit will be less and the company will pay lower taxes. So combination of doing something that could benefit the employee if you could defer the bonus, or you may want to pay it earlier or later depending on the cash flow for the organization so that they can manipulate their tax debt. Long-term incentives, these fall into the categories that we talked about before with stock options and the stock purchase plans. Because this is a longer term rather than, get a good return in a quarter and get a bonus for it, this is like the stock option where you're going to be there for 5 years. So you're going to be more dedicated to the company in the long term. This is probably going to be more beneficial overall for the mission of the company, because short-term incentives can sometimes backfire because people will cut corners and take actions to get short-term success that could undercut your ability to perform later. A lot of good companies do a mixture of both. Slide 29 covers the performance measures for executives, so you use the balanced scorecard. The SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is the federal agency that oversees publicly traded corporations, they require that the executive compensation be reported on their quarterly reports. So however you're going to be doing it, we talked about transparency, it definitely needs to be transparent if you're a publicly traded company. The Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform Act that came out after the last recession also requires companies to report the ratio of the median compensation for your employees as compared to the CEO and other executives' compensation. We showed a video in class not too long ago that was based on the information that the SEC collected that showed that some CEOs are making 1,500 or 2,000 times what the median pay for their employees were. The only reason we know about that is because of the reporting requirements through the Dodd-Frank Act. So if you're a company and you're going to be doing this and you are publicly traded, the way that you compensate your executives needs to be taken in consideration, because if you release this information, you could have a disincentive for the rank and file. If they think that the executives are getting paid too much, it could be a disincentive for them because they don't think they're getting their fair share. Slide 30 talks about ethical issues. So the executives need to be honest about what's going on. They shouldn't be doing things like insider trading, which is illegal. For those of you who don't know, insider trading is when a publicly traded company has employees that have knowledge that the public is not aware of yet. If I'm going to buy stock in a publicly traded company and I purchase that stock, I am an owner. Even if I don't work there, I've given you my money, I am an owner, and I have the right to know through the fiduciary duty of the other owners how the company is performing. If I own stock in the company and you work in the company and you own stock too, you may be creating the report that's going to the SEC. You cannot trade your stock until after the report is made public for all of the owners. So on Friday, you know that we had a bad quarter and that stock prices are probably going to go down after that news is released. You cannot sell your stock on Friday. You have to wait until Monday when the report comes out and the market opens and take the hit, just like me, who is an outside stockholder. Slide 31 starts the summary, and that basically covers Chapter 13. I'm going to do a separate video for Chapter 11 as well. Thanks.